commencement only 2 weeks away, Len's students were torpid and galvanic by turns. Then there was the matter of his contract for next year, and the possible opening at Oster High, which would mean more money, and the parent-teachers thing tonight, at which Superintendent Greer and his wife would be regally present. Moira was knee-deep in Volume 1 of Der Untergang des Abendlandes. Moving her lips, an occasional guttural escaped her. Len cleared his throat. Moi? Und also des Tragerschen. What in God's name does he mean by that? What, Len? He made an irritated noise. Why not try the English edition? Leo wants to learn German. What were you going to say? Len closed his eyes for a moment. About this PTA business. You sure you want to go? Well, of course it's pretty important, isn't it? Unless you think I look too sloppy. No, damn it. But are you feeling up to it? There were faint violet crescents under Moira's eyes. She had been sleeping badly. Sure, she said. All right. Then you'll go see the doctor tomorrow? I said I would. And you won't say anything about Leo to Mrs. Greer or anybody? She looked slightly embarrassed. Not till he's born, I think, don't you? It would be an awfully hard thing to prove. Even you wouldn't have believed me if you hadn't felt him kick. The experiment had not been repeated, though Len had asked often enough. All little Leo had wanted, Moira said, was to establish communication with his mother. He didn't seem to be interested in Len at all. Too young, she explained. And still, Len recalled the frogs his biology class had dissected last semester. One of them had had 2 hearts. This disorderly cell growth, like a cancer, unpredictable, extra fingers or toes, or a double dose of Cortex? And I'll burp like a lady, if at all, Moira assured him cheerfully as they got ready to leave. The room was empty except for the ladies of the committee, 2 nervously smiling male teachers, and the impressive bulk of Superintendent Greer when the Conningtons arrived. Card table legs shrieked on the bare floor. The air was heavy with wood polish and musk. Greer advanced, beaming fixedly. Well, isn't this nice? How are you young folks this warm evening? Oh, we thought we'd be here earlier, Mr. Greer, said Moira with pretty vexation. She looked surprisingly schoolgirlish and chic. The lump that was Leo was hardly noticeable unless you caught her in profile. I'll go right now and help the ladies. There must be something I can still do. No, now we won't hear of it. But I'll tell you what you can do. You can go right over there and say hello to Mrs. Greer. I know she's dying to sit down and have a good chat with you. Go ahead now. Don't worry about this husband of yours. I'll take care of him. Moira receded into a scattering of small shrieks of pleasure, at least half of them arcing across a gap of mutual dislike. Greer, exhibiting perfect dentures, exhaled Listerine. His pink skin looked not only scrubbed, but disinfected. His gold-rimmed glasses belonged in an optometrist's window, and his tropical suit had obviously come straight from the cleaners. It was impossible to think of Greer unshaven, Greer smoking a cigar, Greer with a smudge of axle grease on his forehead, or Greer making love to his wife. Well, sir, this weather... When I think of what this valley was like 20 years ago... At today's prices? Len listened with growing admiration, putting in comments where required. He had never realized before that there were so many absolutely neutral topics of conversation. A few more people straggled in, raising the room temperature about half a degree per capita. Greer did not perspire. He merely glowed. Across the room, Moira was now seated chummily with Mrs. Greer, a large-bosomed woman in an outrageously unfashionable hat. Moira appeared to be telling a joke. Len knew perfectly well that it was a clean one, but he listened tensely all the same, until he heard Mrs. Greer yelp with laughter. Her voice carried well. Oh, that's priceless. Oh, dear, I only hope I can remember it. Len had resolutely not been thinking of ways to turn the conversation toward the Oster vacancy. He stiffened again when he realized that Greer had abruptly begun to talk shop. His heart began pounding absurdly. Greer was asking highly pertinent questions in a good-humored but businesslike way, drawing Len out, and not even bothering to be the slightest bit Machiavellian about it. Len answered candidly, except when he was certain that he knew what the superintendent wanted to hear. Then he lied like a Trojan. Mrs. Greer had conjured up a premature pot of tea, and, oblivious of the stares of the thirsty teachers present, she and Moira were hogging it, heads together, as if they were plotting the overthrow of the Republic, or exchanging recipes. Greer listened attentively to Len's final reply, which was delivered with as pious an air as if Len had been a Boy Scout swearing on the manual. But since the question had been, "Do you plan to make teaching your career?" there was not a word of truth in it. He then inspected his paunch, and assumed a mild theatrical frown. Len, with that social sixth sense which is unmistakable when it operates, knew that his next words were going to be, "You may have heard that Oster High will be needing a new science teacher next fall." At this point, Moira made a noise like a seal. The ensuing silence was broken a moment later by a hearty scream, followed instantly by a clatter and a bone-shaking thud. Mrs. Greer was sitting on the floor, legs sprawled, hat over her eye. She appeared to be attempting to perform some sort of excessively pagan dance. "It was Leo," Moira incoherently told Len at home. "You know she's English. She said of course a cup of tea wouldn't hurt me, and she insisted I go ahead and drink it while it was hot, and I couldn't." "No, no, wait," said Len in a controlled fury. "What?" "So I drank some, and Leo kicked up and made me burp the burp I was saving up, and—" "Oh, Lord." "Then he kicked the teacup out of my hand into her lap, and I wish I was dead." On the following day, Len took Moira to the doctor's office, where they read dog-eared copies of The Rotarian and Field and Stream for an hour. Dr. Berry was a round little man with soulful eyes and a 24-hour bedside manner. On the walls of his office, where it is customary for doctors to hang all sorts of diplomas and certificates of membership, Berry had only 3. The rest of the space was filled with enlarged colored photographs of beautiful, beautiful children. When Len followed Moira determinedly into the consulting room, Berry looked mildly shocked for a moment, then apparently decided to carry on as if nothing outre had happened. You could not say that he spoke or even whispered. He rustled. "Now, Mrs. Connington, we're looking just fine today. How have we been feeling?" "Just fine. My husband thinks I'm insane." "That's good. Well, that's a funny thing for him to think, isn't it?" Berry glanced at the wall midway between himself and Len, then shuffled some file cards rather nervously. "Now, have we had any soreness in our stomach?" "Yes. He's been kicking me black and blue." Berry misinterpreted Moira's brooding glance at Len, and his eyebrows twitched involuntarily. "The baby," said Len. "The baby kicks her." Berry coughed. Any headaches, dizziness, vomiting, swelling in our legs or ankles?" "No." "All righty. Now let's just find out how much we've gained, and then we'll get up on the examination table." Berry drew the sheet down over Moira's abdomen as if it were an exceptionally fragile egg. He probed delicately with his fat fingertips, then used the stethoscope. "Those X-rays," said Len, "have they come back yet?" "Mm-hmm," said Berry. "Yes, they have." He moved the stethoscope and listened again. "Did they show anything unusual?" Len asked. Berry's eyebrows twitched a polite question. "We've been having a little argument," Moira said in a strained voice, "about whether this is an ordinary baby or not." Berry took the stethoscope tubes away from his ears. He gazed at Moira like an anxious spaniel. "Now let's not worry about that. We're going to have a perfectly healthy, wonderful baby, and if anybody tells us differently, why, we'll just tell them to go jump in the lake, won't we?" "The baby is absolutely normal?" Len said in a marked manner. "Absolutely,"